Welcome to 20th Century Music and Arts. In this episode, I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite albums by my favorite band, The Fall. Now, the band The Fall has a vast catalog. They've got 31 studio albums, at least 30 live albums and semi-live albums, and lots of compilations, and there's been 66 musicians being in the band between the years of, say, like 1976 till 2018. Of course, the one constant member being Marquis Smith. So in this video, I'm going to kind of narrow it to what are my top 10 albums by The Fall. While I'm most partial to their albums from the early to mid 80s. I'm going to include a few albums from the 1990s and even one from the 2000s. Anyway, enough of me talking, let's get started. Of course, the first album on the list is Dragnet from 1979. This, in my opinion, is where The Fall really started to find their sound. The sound is the dictionary definition of the lo-fi, and it certainly sports a primitive production. In fact, the studio was so shocked by the sound, they took their names off the credits. I mean, this is like Can meets rockabilly meets this primitive dirge, with Smith doing his characteristic rants over top. Side one starts out with the upbeat psychic dance hall, which, quickly kind of descends into a rockabilly cacophony. The Fall always create this sort of unique groove, and you've got this kitchen sink / magic realism in the lyrics. The whole album is fantastic, but for me the highlight tracks are A Figure Walks, Print Head, Before the Moon Falls, Muzarary's Daughter. So, you know what, it's also Flat of Angels is great, and of course the really primitive sounding Spectre vs. Rector. It's a real menacing sounding album, and it was a foreshadowing of great things to come.
Rocky, it's quite the psychic dance hall versus End of catchline, end of hook line.
Let's move on to Grotesque After the Gram from 1980. The album was produced by three people, Grant Showbiz, Jeff Travis, and actually Mayo Thompson of Red Crayola. Grotesque, it's grotesque in the sense that it's describing Manchester, the city, and the gram is, of course, the gram of speed that Mr. Smith was partial to. Bitter satire is all over the place, especially on tracks like English Scheme, CNC Mitherings, and The Impression of J. Temperance. The latter two tracks mentioned there also have this kind of sinister plotting drone to them, as does the great Graham Friday. There's also, the upbeat and obtuse rockability of Pay Your Rates, Container Drivers. The album closes with the 9-minute The North Will Rise Again, where of course Marquis Smith introduced the character of Joe Total, the yet unborn son. Another great plotting epic. The song on this album, again, they're discordant, but they're kind of catchy. It's got a rhythm, but it almost feels like it fall apart at any point, but yet it doesn't. That's what's great about it.
Pay your rates! First was cash and carry house dance in Lancashire there, eh? And the North will rise again. He said you are mistaken, friend.
Let's go on to the masterpiece of the early period. Of course, I'm talking about Hex Induction Hour from 1982, and as it says on the cover, it clocks in at an hour, 60 minutes. It's got two drummers, two guitarists in the lineup here, and the sound is a thick, yet lo-fi, yet layered. And really, it's got the influence of the Velvet Underground Can and Captain Beefheart all over the place. The whole album is, a trek through Smith's imagination. It starts out with the thunderous The Classical, followed by the amazing Jawbone and Air Rifle, a bizarre hunting tale. There is the hypnotic Hip Priest. You'd hear that later on Silence of the Lambs. Garage rock sounds and the Velvet Underground influence is all over Fortress / English Deer Park. Mere Suede Mag is noisy and dissonant, as most fall tracks are. The two tracks with winter in the name, they're slow and drony, and this great Just Stop S-Ways. It's actually quite upbeat. The Can-inspired song Iceland is an homage to the country where actually much of the recording of this album was done. Quite an isolated place in the early 80s apparently, and the locals would come out and see the band when they would play live, so Smith is actually apologizing for influencing the Sugar Cubes and their singer Bjork. Anyway, this is the peak of the early fall period, and there's a great track at the end, and this day, it's 10 minutes of great noisy rock.
Sega legend, Sega destruction, witness the last of the godmen.
Now I'm going to go into 3 albums that, in my opinion, represent the band's peak. The first of these albums is The Wonderful Frightening World of the Fall. We still got the double drum lineup at this point, but these albums also include Brick Smith, who joined the band in 1983. She's from America, and of course she became Marky Smith's wife. And she brings this sense of pop melody. It's kind of a counterbalance to Smith's unmelodic Manchurian rants. The album's opener is real upbeat barn burner, The Lay of the Land. It starts out with these chants taken from the television series Quartermass Conclusion. Again, ignites into a kind of a raucous rockabilly charge. Elves has got this riff that sounds exactly the same as the Stooges song I Want to Be Your Dog. They experiment with kind of dub-style recording with tracks like Bug Day, this kind of a interesting soundscape. And then there's the melodic but kind of deranged Disney's Dream Debased. Brick's vocals, again, they create a kind of ethereal beauty. Again, it contrasts with sort of Smith's and all the stuff that he does. Yeah, just a great album. Lots of kind of charging rockabilly, cerebral jams, weird soundscapes, and it's great. And the follow-up album, this Nation Saving Grace, this is a great album too. It's recorded in 1985 and produced by John Leckie. There is more of an emphasis here on the bass and the drums. It starts out with this really cool creepy instrumental called Mansion before Mark declares, "All those who mind entitle themselves and whose main entitle is themselves shall feel the wrath of my bombast," and then it goes right into the track Bombast with a great heavy riff and Smith singing through a megaphone, and there's all kinds of other great songs like What You Need and Cruisers Creek, like these tracks that just kind of repeat over and over again. And the track LA, which closes side 1, it's probably one of the earliest examples of the Fall really incorporating electronic music. They had done it a little bit before, but here they really keep that as the basis of the sound, but it's actually really, really cool. Of course, it's the great My New House, which is just a great kind of acoustic riff, and he's got this cacophony of sound and great stuff. And of course there's the experimental paint work where Smith had accidentally recorded over it with a university lecture about red giant stars, and he kept it in the mix. And there's the great tribute to Can singer called I Am Demo Suzuki, and yeah, just a fitting album. Really, really great stuff, really creative, really layered, really good stuff. And then, of course, the third album is 1986's Ben Sinister. It's got this sparse sound in the production. It's very, very open, like open room sounding to me. It's cool because it balances both the sort of gloomy, dirgy side of the Fall with some of these kind of upbeat, polished songs. The darker songs you hear are kind of like R.O.D., Gross Chapel, British Grenadiers, Riddler, Autotech Pilot. Then you get stuff like Shoulder Pads, which is just it's great pop hook and you get a part 2, 1 and 2 of that. You know, they cover things like Mr. Pharmacist by The Other Half. It's just a really, really solid album.
600 pounds, gas and flesh. Robson and his spares. It's super spares. Last night I heard 3 real loud ricochets from the police tech center at the top of my street.
Last album I'm going to choose from the 80s is, of course, their album I Am Curious Orange from 1988. Now, this was a collaboration that the Fall would be doing these live shows with the ballet dancer Michael Clark. By this point, they had a bit of a cleaner sound. There's a lot more incorporation of programming and synthesizers, and that's how they would continue into the 90s. This would be the last album with Bricks, at least for a while. Great opening track of Big New Prince. It's catchy and dirgy. They do, this great acoustic guitar with the overture for Curious Orange. Jerusalem, their cover of the William Blake poetry, which is just, it's with Smith reciting it, and it's got layers of reverb. And then I just love the solid riff on the song Wrong Place, Right Time. Really great stuff. Yeah, they would definitely go more in a synth kind of direction, but they'd always keep those kind of dirgy riffs that the Fall were known for. Again, going into the 90s, we're seeing the influence of kind of DJ and techno music, but again, they are keeping the guitar sound and the sort of sardonic vocals of Marquis Smith. You can't only make it so poppy just with his vocal style. One of the albums that kind of stands out for me from this time period is the Infotainment Scan from 1993. It's full of cover songs, so you got disco song Lost in Music, this song called I'm Going to Spain, and a cover of a Lee Scratch Perry song, Why Are People So Grudgeful. It's got some great kind of riffs here though. Even though it was quite clean sounding, the riffs are really quite good. So on the song The League of Bald-Headed Men, it almost sounds like Led Zeppelin's Misty Mountain Hop. Paranoid Man and Cheap SHIT Room, it has a great intensity. There's also this great rock sound to stuff like It's a Curse and Glam Racket, where Smith, he kind of unleashes his biting criticism on the idea of retro and maybe Britpop as a whole.
I'm lost in music. Feel so alive. When you end up in some sort of a sonic complex, and the person next to you is someone insecure. Well, they forsooth them.
Another album I really liked from the 90s is 1995 Cerebral Costic. A lot of people think this album is a hit and miss, but I actually really quite like it. I love the opening track, The Joke, and that actually remained in the Fall gigs for many years to come. Now, Bricks had come back on the tour prior to this album, so she's actually on the recording, and she's all over the place here on tracks like Don't Call Me Darling and Feeling Numb. That's actually a song where Smith's going on about being on Prozac. There's this really, really weird experimental piece called Bonkers in Phoenix. Just like a weird soundscape with weird chipmunk vocals. And a great cover of Frank Zappa's I'm Not Satisfied. And, there's all kinds of great tracks here. Life Just Bounces, The Aphid, Pearl City, One Day, Northwest Fashion Show. Really, really quite a solid album.
Go back to your disease, but
I gotta be honest, I wasn't really following the Fall's music as much as the Millennium, but every time I checked in, I was always pleasantly surprised. His band from the 90s would break up by 98, so he would form various lineups through the 2000s, but definitely the guitar and the garage rock sound was kind of more front and center. But one album that I looked at was Fall Heads Roll from 2005. They do a great cover of The Moves' I Can Hear the Grass Grow. Great song called What About Us, heavy guitar, and Smith at the beginning, he's making these ranting sounds that you can't really figure out. But then the lyrics come in, and it's apparently about an East German immigrant who wanted the injections from one Harold Shipman. You can look him up if you want to know what those injections were. There's this subdued groove in Midnight in Aspen, and that continues on to another track called In Aspen Reprise. You Wainer, again, you got that solid, dirgy fall groove. But hands down, the one track that is absolutely incredible is Blindness. It's just 7 minutes, and the entire song is based around this one hypnotic bass line. This is one of the best bass lines I've ever heard. And they just layer the sound on top. And you know, this song was so catchy in its menacing way that it was actually used in a Mitsubishi Outlander commercial.
Flat is evil. Welcome. Living. Legal.
Say people all in line was making them look at me.
You know what? I'll throw in a bonus album here. I'm going to include one compilation album, something that Marquis Smith was very much against. And if the album is In Palace of Swords Reversed, great compilation album. That's the one that got me into the fall. I had it on cassette. It does covers the years between period of 1980 and 1983. There's so many great songs. Many of them are singles. Some are on the albums, but many great songs like Pearl Art Threat, Totally Wired, Fit and Working Again, a great live version of The Neighborhood of Infinity, Kicker, Conspiracy, and Wings. Just a solid album. Anyway, so if you want to get into the fall, there are some suggestions for some albums. Thank you for watching 20th Century Music and Arts. Please like, share, subscribe, and let me know. What's your favorite fall song? What's your favorite fall album? Thanks.